So, traditional Jewish, Christian, and Muslim. To understand atheist and agnostic as well.
Dreidel, I made it out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, then Dreidel I shall play. Hey! Today, on the Holy Watermelon Podcast, we're talking about Hanukkah. Brian wanted that as our soft opening, so I thought I'd oblige.
I like it.
Okay. Last episode we talked about Diwali, which is the Hindu festival of light, and now we're talking about Hanukkah, which is the Jewish festival of light. Yay!
Yay! It's pretty awesome. I've been celebrating Hanukkah for a long time now.
You have, and it's always fun. Can I ask why you started doing that?
I'm trying to remember the first thing that really made me want to do it. And I think it was mostly about celebrating the dedication of the temple. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has a few temples that were dedicated over Hanukkah, which out of the almost 200 temples, it's a very small handful that are dedicated over Hanukkah, which is the festival of celebration of the dedication of the temple.
Of the temple, yeah.
So it's kind of cool. And the Edmonton Temple, fairly close to here, is one of those very few that's dedicated over Hanukkah.
Interesting. Hanukkah means dedication.
Exactly.
So it's very redundant at this point.
If you didn't get there already, you're there now.
We're here, all here together now.
Yeah. And so this year, it ran from November 28th to December 6th, which is the day that this episode will be reaching our listeners. And Katie's double checking.
I really don't know if I believe you. 8, 22, 6. Okay, you're right. Yes, Hanukkah's over today. Yay! Happy Hanukkah.
So, for those of you who have been celebrating Hanukkah, I hope you've been enjoying it.
Oops. So future Katie, you'll have already gone to Preston's Hanukkah party, which he hasn't even confirmed if he's having yet or not. That's cool.
I definitely told you we were doing a Hanukkah.
You said you weren't sure how big.
Yeah.
So that maybe I'm not invited. Similar to Diwali, it's Hanukkah is celebrated on the 25th day of Kislev of the Hebrew calendar. And the Hebrew calendar is also a lunar calendar, just like the Hindu and Muslim calendar. From what I've read, it's basically only the Gregorian calendar, which is what we follow, that is a solar calendar. Everything else seems pretty lunar.
I mean, I've never looked into it, but I bet you there's a couple other solar calendars out there.
I said we should do an episode on calendars. Because some of them are tied to religions, right?
Absolutely.
Just, anyway.
I mean, the Gregorian calendar is a religious calendar.
Yeah.
It's basically the Catholic calendar. It's slightly different from the Julian calendar, which started out in Rome as well, but was basically
Orthodox follows the Julian.
Yeah, it got abandoned by the Catholics, and the Orthodox are like, we still like it for a while.
Anyway, so that's a digression, but maybe we'll do an episode on calendars one day. So just like Diwali, it's meant to be celebrated during the darkest days of the year because it's the festival of the light, to help with both the metaphor and to make the lights all that more spectacular.
Yeah, it's pretty great. So even though it happens in December alongside huge holidays like the ones you're familiar with, Christmas and Diwali and Kwanzaa, maybe, if you know Kwanzaa, it's relatively minor religious holiday in Judaism, especially compared to the high holy days of Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, and even Passover. Those are kind of the big ones. And so Hanukkah, like Christmas, is a great time to enjoy the fact that there is a holiday where you get to spend time with family and friends. And that's really kind of the big deal there.
And this was super interesting to me, something I didn't know about Hanukkah before. And why it's less religious is that Hanukkah isn't mentioned in the Hebrew Bible at all.
Nope.
Because the events that we celebrate happened after the book was written.
Yeah, pretty much. The Hanukkah story is recorded in the book of the Maccabees, which is found in the Deuterocanonical books. aka the Apocrypha, found in the Greek literary tradition of the Jewish people in Alexandria, Egypt, preserved in the Septuagint.
You just said a lot of words that I need explained, so I'm sure some of our listeners need that explained as well.
All right, I'll start at the beginning of that list, and I'll go through my big words.
Thank you.
Deuterocanonical is a word that's used especially by Catholics, where they differentiate those books that did make it into the Hebrew canon from those that didn't. So there's the Maccabees, for example. There's an alternate version of the book of Ezra. There's a handful of stories about characters like Tobit and Judith. There's extensions to the book of Daniel, things like that we can find ancient sources saying, yeah, these exist in the Greek literary tradition, but for some reason we don't see them written in Hebrew. It's kind of weird.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so there's that distinction placed, and a similar distinction is made by Protestants, but they're like, no. If it's not in the Hebrew Bible, it's apocryphal. It's not even important. Well, actually, it kind of really bugged me in 2011, 10 years ago. I bought the 400 anniversary edition reproduction of a King James Bible.
Wow.
And there was this huge section missing in the middle of the book, which is where the Apocrypha goes. Because Zondervan, the people who publish this reproduction, decided we don't like the Apocrypha, so we're just not going to print that portion of this epic anniversary edition book.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was actually really frustrating for me. Because all of the work that goes into this book is actually really awesome. It looks really cool. It's got all kinds of really beautifully drawn family trees and stuff. And they just cut out all of the Apocrypha.
Rude.
Yeah, it was a little frustrating. Septuagint is the Greekish word.
Meaning 7 something.
70.
7, okay.
Yeah, there's a tradition that is really hard to prove that 70 elders took 70 days to translate the Hebrew scriptures into Greek. And they each did it individually and all came out with the exact same text result.
Miraculously, yeah.
And so, yeah, that would totally be a miracle. Problem is, there's no way that that's true. There's loads of evidence that it took them many decades to complete this task in a way that everybody was satisfied with it. And there's no way that they all would have reproduced the exact same Greek text from the Hebrew. But that's the story anyway.
All right. So what happens in the Hanukkah story?
All right. So most of the Hanukkah story is found in the Maccabees, first Maccabees. And the story starts out celebrating Alexander the Great. And then it goes on to describe how awful his successors were to the people of Judea, especially Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who is said to have outlawed the cult of Yahweh in 168 BCE and killed thousands of Jews and rededicated Jerusalem's temple to Zeus. So naturally, this gets the religious zealots all riled up.
And the cult of Yahweh being the Jews.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like naturally, everybody would be really uncomfortable with it. But the people who are like really zealous for their religion,
would be furious.
Yeah, they're absolutely incensed. And 4 brothers from the priestly caste come to be known as the Maccabees, which means hammer, because of their intense violence against not only their Seleucid rulers, but also against any Hellenized Jews. So eventually, these hammerers managed to defeat the Seleucids and went about forcing anybody left in Judea to convert to Judaism under the threat of death.
So they just went back and forth with violence.
Yeah, these people were incredibly violent. But they got stuff done. Yeah. Anyway, after clearing out all the Hellenic paraphernalia out of the temple, the Maccabees selected their brother Jonathan to be their high priest. Not exactly from a family that had the right to that office,
No.
but they felt they deserved it because they did all the work.
Eh,
And it's hard to argue with the people with their
with the
reputation.
horse, with the muscle, with the
Yeah.
hammer.
Exactly. Exactly. So the Seleucids tried to take the city back, but failed, and eventually they agreed to restore Judean liberty. During all this time, the Jews were kept from offering sacrifices and observing the high holy days. So as soon as they could, they dedicated the temple in a ceremony that had previously been associated with the Feast of Tabernacles. And from that time forward, the anniversary was commemorated as Hanukkah. And that's more or less the story we have in the Maccabees, condensed real tight.
Real tight. Your 5-minute summary on why we celebrate Hanukkah.
I guess, yeah. There's more to it, and that's a good thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously there's a whole political climate that historians and scholars have looked into that
Yeah.
it's just a rabbit hole for us.
Yeah. So Hanukkah, being the dedication after all of this, celebrates the rededication in 165 BCE. So little over 2,000 years ago. The miracle of Hanukkah is the menorah. There was only enough oil to keep the menorah's lamps lit for one day, but all their festivities would require that they have to keep the lamp lit. They could have put it off. They really could have, because it took that time to produce the oil they needed with the very specific recipe that they're supposed to use.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there anything special. I just thought they didn't have enough oil.
Yeah, no, there's herbs and whatnot mixed into it.
Oh, interesting.
It's meant to culminate in a very specific scent experience in the temple. A thing that's foreign to pretty much everybody on the planet today now.
As in, like, we couldn't recreate it?
It's just not part of anybody's temple experience in almost any popular religion today.
Interesting.
People don't use scent very much in worship a lot. There's some people will use a censer and burn a little bit of incense in the temple. Not quite the same.
I've told you my Orthodox funeral story.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what when you're like, scent isn't a big part, I'm like, yes, it is. I can go back to a Ukrainian funeral like that.
For sure. But this
particular oil scent is not common anymore.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's
all.
used anywhere.
Interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, it would take more than a week to get more of the oil they needed. But we can't delay this anymore. We need to rededicate the temple. So we're doing it now. And even though they had the 1 day's worth of oil, they had oil for the full 8 days. There's 2 different versions of this where they would use up the oil for the day, like just feed it into the lamps and just go. And the vats would be empty, and then they'd just miraculously be full the next day. And the alternate story is that the vat just never emptied during that time.
Yeah, I read that it would miraculously be full again, like they'd empty it and then go back. That's the version I read in my research.
Yeah.
But
and today, instead of having oil lamps, most people use candles. And it still is lights, so we're still good. So this bit about the oil and the lamps is not found in the book of Maccabees. Instead, we find the oldest mention of the oil miracle in the Talmud, recorded about 600 years after the rebellion. So we're talking in the neighborhood of the 5th, 6th century CE.
so this is kind of like the Ascension of Mary, where it's kind of become canon, but it's not actually in any of the books.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we all just kind of go, oh yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Right.
Okay.
So, like you mentioned before, there's no reason for it to be mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. It gets one singular mention in the New Testament, barely in passing. It's more of just to let you know that Jesus was doing a thing at a specific time. They didn't say that he actually celebrated Hanukkah, but in John chapter 10, verse 22, it says, and this thing happened during Hanukkah.
I pulled it up because I was really curious. It said, tell me if this is the New International Version.
Okay.
Then came the festival of dedication at Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was in the temple courts walking in Solomon's colonnade.
Yeah.
That's it. There it is.
Yeah. It's perfectly reasonable to translate the word as dedication, especially since we know this coming from a Greek text. But a really good translator would recognize, hey, maybe we should use the word Hanukkah in this particular verse.
Yes, and it's like re-emphasized it was winter.
Yeah.
Right, like there's no doubt that
Right.
there's no other festival of dedication that they're mixing this up with.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who really like to divorce Jesus from Judaism, and there's no good reason for it.
Wasn't he a rabbi? Jesus was a rabbi.
Jesus was a Jewish rabbi of the
Christianity is
Pharisaic tradition.
Yeah. Christianity is the cult of Judaism that just took off to its own thing.
Yeah. And so I found 2 Bibles where the editor was really committed to making sure that you saw Jesus in the situation that he lived in. And so use Hebrew words whenever it's appropriate, chose not to use Hellenized forms of names, but stuck with traditional Aramaic forms of names, and used Hanukkah instead of the dedication.
Let's talk about what a celebration looks like, what your party's going to be like. Okay.
So when I celebrate Hanukkah, it's not exactly
No, it's not.
your traditional Jewish experience.
We'll get to your party plans later after we hit record. Hit stop. So there are no obligations to refrain from activities like you would on the Jewish Sabbath for Hanukkah. Most Jews will actually go to work, but may come home early for celebrations because there are no religious reasons to be staying at home.
Yeah.
The menorah is a popular icon fixture in Hanukkah in Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
It is a candle holder, and it has 9 candles, so one for each night of Hanukkah, and the shamash. Did I say that right?
Shamash.
Shamash. It's an extra candle that is used to light the other candles. A candle is lit on the menorah every night, 1 on the first night, 2 on the second night, etc. And blessings are offered with the candles that are lit every single night. I thought you were going to add more to this note.
I did.
Did you?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to give us a prayer, but there's actually a really good website I found that has dates, times, and blessings for that. Well, it's past now. That had all the dates, times, and blessings for Hanukkah this year.
It has them for next year, too.
And has them for next year, too.
So an interesting thing about the menorah is that there's a special menorah just for Hanukkah. A normal Jewish menorah has 7 lampstands, but the Hanukkah, the Hanukkah menorah, is the one with 9.
What is a regular menorah used for? I don't.
Usually you'll see them in synagogues and temples. They are modeled after the one that we see described in the Hebrew Bible that's meant to bring light to the whole tabernacle. Remind people
is this
of the
in the
presence.
really boring chapter?
Yeah, you didn't enjoy that section very much at all.
That's where it is.
When it describes everything in the temple in excruciating detail.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very helpful for people who want to reproduce it. Not so helpful for people who just want to know the story. Right?
I mean, it was helpful when you explained that there are different books for different reasons, and this just happens to be the floor plans chapter, but it was a slog.
Yeah. So there are 3 special prayers that are offered for Hanukkah. There's a general prayer of gratitude for the Hanukkah miracle. There's a prayer of gratitude for our own living freedom today. And there's a blessing over the candles of the Hanukkah and gratitude for the persisting tradition that binds believers to their Maker.
I got really excited about the food, which If you know me at all, that shouldn't surprise you. Um, I had learned, and I knew what some of the traditional foods were. Latkes, jelly donuts, rugelach are all customary Hanukkah foods. But I didn't realize that fried foods were popular because of the oil.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't connect the symbolism. I just thought it was like we eat turkey. Like, I don't know why we eat turkey.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was like what people did traditionally, but I like that it has ties into the temple miracle.
Yeah. One thing that...
Also delicious.
Right. One thing that I really appreciate about Judaism's dietary tradition is that there's a reason for all of the things being the way they are food-wise around the holidays. For Passover, unleavened bread, and the story is we didn't have time for the bread to rise. We had to get out of Dodge.
Wow, out of Dodge?
And so it's flat bread. Matzah is basically just flour and water.
Yum.
If you want it to be delicious, you're going to have to add something to it.
Yep.
And yeah, the oil for anything related to Hanukkah, absolutely the deal. And the holy barbecues every day at the temple back in the day, that would have been some good times too.
Right. This is why I get excited for your party. And
Right.
so I had heard of rugelach before, but I didn't really, I'd heard the word. And, when I read it, I was like, oh yeah, rugelach. But I was like, I don't actually know what that is.
Well, it sounds like arugula.
That's what Brian said too. And I didn't get that at all. But I also took German, which is so similar to Yiddish.
Sure.
I was like, rugelach, okay. But then I read what they were, and I was like, Preston, I'm bringing these to your party. So it is Yiddish for little twists. And they are pastries that can be filled with, they have a cream cheese base, and then you can fill them with basically anything you want. Nuts, fruit, cinnamon sugar, etc. And I was like, that sounds amazing. So I'm going to make a bunch for us to consume.
Right. When I first see them, my instinct is to compare them to croissants. Yeah. But there's so much more.
I just like the thought of cream cheese and cinnamon sugar in a baked pastry.
Mm-hmm.
So they know how to do it right, food-wise.
Right.
Another, I think this is probably pretty popular if you've went to secular school, is knowing about the dreidel that I sang about earlier. We definitely talked about the dreidel when we were in elementary school and learning about other people, and we play dreidel at Preston's party every year. It is a spinning top game played by Jewish children, during a Hanukkah. And it has 4 sides, and each side has a letter that represents the Hebrew words.
Nes Gadol Haya Sham.
Which means, and I actually really like this, a great miracle happened there.
Yeah. There's a variant in Israel that changes there to here for what should be pretty obvious reasons.
Because that's where it happened.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dreidel's kind of a cool name, I guess. Instead of calling it a top, Dreidel is the Yiddish name, basically means turner.
Dreidel, dreidel, dreidel. I made it out of clay.
And it's also called Sevivon. It's Hebrew. It has the same meaning, turner. Dreidel is also known by a couple of alternate Yiddish names, like Destiny and A Little Throw. And those were semi-popular names until the Holocaust of the 1940s, when those names lost popularity for some pretty sad reasons.
Yeah. I read one story that tells that the dreidel game was used as a cover for children who were, at the time, this is in the 168 BCE, for children that were illegally studying the Torah. When Seleucid soldiers came by, those studying would pretend to be playing the game. So it actually, there's a story that ties it directly to Hanukkah and not just, we play board games at Christmas because we like to play board games at Christmas.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting story. Unfortunately, it's not well documented at all before the late 19th century.
Fine, but it's cute.
It is a cute story, but when something shows
Santa's
up
not
as a
real.
story... When a story doesn't show up until 2,000 years after the time it's supposed to happen, it makes it hard to believe.
See, my last point.
Right?
Okay.
It's like St. Barbara that we talked about a few months ago.
Fair.
It's like the story came up a long time after she was supposed to exist. Probably wasn't even real, especially if you remember the details of that story.
Also, I don't know like how you hide your Torah fast enough to whip out a tiny dreidel.
Well, usually they were on scrolls rather than a
Oh,
codex.
yeah, okay.
So you just quick roll up, stuff it up somebody's sleeve.
Whip out your dreidel.
Yeah.
Oop. Stop it.
Thanks for that mime work. But this is an audio medium.
So people don't know why we're laughing like 12-year-old boys.
Exactly.
So how can you actually play dreidel, the dreidel game? Because you could probably pick up a dreidel at the dollar store and
Absolutely.
have some fun.
When I do hand out dreidels in large, indiscriminate quantities, I usually buy a whole bunch from a party city, real cheap.
Nice.
So yeah, you can find them all over the place. Ooh, an interesting thing. So there's some evidence that the game might have originated in Britain.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then moved to Germany where Yiddish kids picked it up. I thought that was kind of nifty.
Are like British Jews or just like Britain in general? And it got really
Non-Jewish
popular.
British kids.
Interesting. It
Yeah.
got really popular
Yeah.
in the Jewish community and then moved to. Interesting.
Yeah. Things move all over the place. Though there is evidence, we have found some old tops in the Middle East, but they don't have letters. They're just numbered. Basically a fancy D4 on a top. So for those people who are selling dagger dice, your idea isn't new.
Well, I mean, the rules are simple enough, which we'll run through in just a moment. That there's probably, yeah, it's not exclusively Jewish. It's just
No.
kind of a fun game.
Yeah.
Like tax, something.
You mean jacks?
Jacks, is that what I meant?
The one where you throw the bouncy
Yeah.
ball and then try and grab
Yeah,
the
it's
spiky
jacks.
bits?
Yeah. Excuse me.
I don't think I've ever played jacks.
I was on a huge. I was like 8, and I was on a huge jacks kick.
I had a huge Pog collection.
Ooh.
Man, this is like, we're going back more than 20 years now, back when Pogs were a thing people cared about. Oh, well.
But yeah, so I can kind of see it being like a jacks or a pug
Sure.
of the, who knows how old Dreidel really is. But
Right.
anyways, go ahead with the rules, Preston.
So
for our
traditionally, it's a gambling game. You've got a whole bunch of coins. Very often people play with chocolate coins. In fact, I bet you at this point that's more normal than any other option.
listeners. Or probably like nickels.
I bet you chocolate coins are used more.
Yeah, I would depend on the age of the kid, but yeah, fair.
Anyway, everyone puts some coins in the pot before they spin the dreidel. And depending on which of the 4 sides comes up, you have to take a specific action. If none comes up, which is, each of these names are letters in the Hebrew alphabet, none comes up, you mean you do nothing. Gimel, you get the whole pot. Hey, you get half the pot. And shin, you add to the pot. Sometimes it's shin, there's a chant, shin, put one in. But some traditions, you put one in for each of the 3 points on the top of the shin. So you put 3 in.
Oh, wow.
There's loads of variety in the game
House
as well.
rules.
Yeah. And in Israel, when they say a miracle happened here, there's a pay instead of a shin. And I mean, the fact that it sounds like the English word pay sounds pretty great.
Right.
You put some in. If you run out of coins or gelt, you are out of the game. But people have been trying really hard to make Dreidel more fun for adults, too. And there's all kinds of variants here. You could totally make it a drinking game. I'm very confident that's a thing that people are doing. I've actually found some interesting ones that I thought I would share with you today, too.
Sure.
There's a game called No Limit Texas Hold'em Dreidel.
Okay.
And so you've got 2 dreidels in a cup. And you shake it up and spin your dreidels in your cup, and you keep your cup secret, of course, because this is Texas Hold'em poker with dreidels. And then there's publicly spun dreidels to see what comes up, and you're looking to get your poker hands. It's kind of interesting. Like, you're not going to get runs, but like full house, four of a kind. Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah. People play this. And I will definitely be sharing some great videos related to all this dreidel nonsense on our Discord.
I'm excited for this.
All right. And some people just compete for the longest spin.
Dreidels spin real nice, so...
They can if you're good at it. In fact, there's Major League Dreidel is a thing that's really kind of fun to Google. You can find some great resources and videos. There are semi-serious dreidel tournaments for people of all ages, including a variety of regulated spinning surfaces, depending on the organization. The Spinagogue is just it's so awesome. Again, check the Discord to see this thing, or I suppose you could Google it yourself.
To say the word Spinagogue.
So it's reminiscent of a Beyblade arena. Do you remember Beyblades?
I do, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's no artificial let her rip business, but you spin it.
There should be.
Oh, that would be cheating. Because part of the
Dreidel
challenge...
blade. Dre blade.
I mean, a part of me does really want to see that.
I mean, it's all luck anyway. Like, who cares if you spin shitty or good? Like, the fates will decide.
But the real challenge that most people are playing with the Spinagogue is a time deal. The Spinagogue comes with a timer.
It's a timed one, not a gambling one.
So you spin and you hope for the best, and you get credit for having the longest spin. But this thing also comes with little boards on it, so you can have different mats within the Spinagogue. One of them looks like a skee ball chute, where you want the dreidel to land on a specific point value, and you make money this way.
Wow!
There's a baseball one, which is kind of nifty.
My mind is being blown right now.
People have put a lot of work into making dreidel more fun for everybody, and honestly, they're kicking ass.
Wow.
I've also seen a dreidel board. It looks kind of like a combination of cornhole and shuffleboard, where you spin the dreidel, and I couldn't find the rules for this, but the looks of it, it doesn't really matter which side of your dreidel comes up, but it is important that you're still spinning the dreidel across the board to your opponent's side. You're playing in teams of 2, by the way. And you want to spin your dreidel across the board and have it land in a zone that is going to get you money instead of lose you money.
You know, this all came from kids who were like forced to play dreidel in the corner and got bored with the base game, right?
Absolutely.
I love that.
Right? I really enjoy game design. I've been messing with game rules for ages and writing games of my own for a long time. And this is how I got my start too, is finding a game that I figured this could be better.
This could be better. I love that.
Yeah. So dreidel has come a long way. And honestly, it's made its biggest strides in the last 20 years.
I'm excited to see what we post on our Discord. What you post on our Discord for it. Moving on from the fast-paced, high-stakes world of dreidel. Let's talk about gift giving a little bit for Hanukkah, because I think this is something that I don't want to say it's like foreign, but it's a little surprising because it happens at Christmas or Diwali, which are 2 big gift-giving celebrations. And Hanukkah really isn't a big gift-giving holiday historically, with the exception of Hanukkah Gelt during the Maccabean revolution.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only time in history during the subjugation of the Jews that they were allowed to mint their own coins in their own state. So giving Hanukkah Gelt is symbolic of that. And that being said, coins are either real, like here, have a Looney Preston, or chocolate covered coins. So even then, I don't want to say you don't get anything, but it's either chocolate or a little bit of cash.
I love how you say real money and then use our joke name for our coin.
What do you call it?
Well, according to what I've seen on our stats, a whole third of our audience is down in the States.
A $1 coin. Because we don't have $1 bills. No, okay. I don't know if we're going to cut this or not. But when I was in Australia, I needed to break like a $5 bill for loonies.
Yeah.
To put in the washing machine.
But they weren't loonies. They don't have loons.
Right. And so I was like, I don't know what to ask for. Right? Because they're called quarters, right? We don't call them 25-cent pieces. I mean, you could. People would know. And they're called nickels and they're called dimes. I was like, what is a $1 coin called? Like, I literally couldn't figure it out.
And Canada's the only place that has come up with a reasonable name that's kind of ridiculous
it's
for
loony.
their $1 coin.
It's a loony name.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, a $1 coin or whatever people call it. That's not a loony.
I'm so glad we didn't call the $2 coin the berry.
Was that on the table?
That's what I was very convinced it was going to be when they first announced it. Like, and it's going to have a polar bear on it. Well, obviously it's the berry. And I'm sure I'm not the only person who thought that, even though I was like 6 at the time.
My
or
parents
whatever.
for a really long time called them the Bloonies.
Because they're worth double a loony? That's fantastic.
Anyway,
well,
I've told that to people, like, that sounds cool because it sounds like a doubloon too.
Right?
Anyway, but we are digressing deeply. Because of Western influence and predominantly Christian Christmas influence, gift giving has become more common in the Jewish Hanukkah tradition. However, it is still more often to get 8 small gifts, like think stocking stuffers, one every night instead of having our massive consumer fest that is Christmas morning.
That's pretty easy to appreciate too. Earlier on in our marriage, when we were, feeling pretty tight for money, instead of having Christmas presents at all, because there's so much pressure to get something big for Christmas, we did just go, here's 8 small things over the course of a week. And that was actually pretty nice.
Yeah, we've definitely done stocking stuffers ourselves as well.
Yeah.
If you are, Preston, I feel like you should handle this, but some Hanukkah party etiquette, especially if you are going, to a Jewish family's home for Hanukkah, not just your buddy Preston's house, which is a little more chill. Talk us through some Hanukkah etiquette.
Generally speaking, if you're going to any religious flavored event, don't go in expecting that you know what to do because it's next to Christmas, because Hanukkah's not Christmas. To be willing to be told what to do, which sounds just a little culty, I guess. I'll use your best judgment when you're told what to do, I guess, is the caveat to that. But just be prepared to learn something new and
have new experiences.
Yeah, definitely don't do anything that feels terribly Christmassy for Hanukkah. So red and green, your Christmas colors. I mean, you're probably not going to offend anybody, but it does make you look kind of ignorant.
I'd go more than kind of, but yes.
Yeah. Instead, here's a hint. The Hanukkah colors are blue and white. If you ever forget that, feel free to Google the flag of Israel. That might give you a handy reminder.
Google Hanukkah decor.
Yeah. You've got some options there. Celebrating during Hanukkah is the best way to celebrate Hanukkah. If you wait till Christmas, you could be way off the mark. Sometimes Hanukkah is in November, and you'll occasionally see Thanksgiving events where people will combine Hanukkah with Thanksgiving, and that's a more apt combination.
I mean, it started in November. It was quite early this year. It started in November. I've seen it as sort of late as mid-December, so
yeah,
it was the early one this year, right after American Thanksgiving.
Right. And yeah, not knowing how to Google things, bad excuse for not knowing things. but we try and be helpful as much as we can. Keep this in mind for next year, of course, since Hanukkah is over today.
You could get some last, I hope you had a nice Hanukkah in.
Yeah, and that's
Today.
kind of it. Yeah. So while Hanukkah is a festival of lights, and in a way that's kind of comparable to Diwali, celebrating a victory over cosmic darkness, there are some great layers that are universally observed among believers, including the celebration of religious freedom because of the victory of the Maccabees over the Seleucids. There's the celebration of national resilience despite millennia of persecution. There's so much of the history of Judaism and the Jewish people is just awful. So much torment from all of their neighbors, almost all of the time.
Constantly.
It's a bit of a bummer. And yet this people has done so well in surviving and thriving.
Yeah.
And thirdly, the celebration of God's persistent covenant is hugely important, that even after all of the struggles, they can still rebuild that temple 2,000 years ago. And for many Jews, there is the dream of rebuilding the temple again one day. And whether or not it'll be rededicated on Hanukkah, hard to say. The first time the temple was dedicated under King Solomon in Jerusalem, it was attached to the Feast of Tabernacles. So to say that there's a hard, fast rule of when it has to be dedicated, it's a little squishy there.
It'd be pretty symbolic to do it
in either of those two things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Honestly, it'd be weird if it wasn't either of those two things.
Yes. Especially after this long.
Right?
They've waited a long time.
Yeah.
They're going to keep waiting.
Right? I mean, it's not on the horizon yet.
No.
But it's the thing people are talking about. But in the meantime, there's the temple in our hearts.
Good.
Right? There's a lot of love in Hanukkah. And there's a lot of spelling variations of Hanukkah.
Oh, man, I spelled it wrong every single time.
Did you, though?
I did, because I'm a 2 N's and 1 K kind of person, and then it would tell me it was wrong and had to go back and change it to 1 N and 2 Ks.
Right. The weird thing is that the spelling in Hebrew doesn't double up any of the consonants.
So I'm not wrong.
There's so many very common spellings of Hanukkah that if you've spelt it in a way that people can recognize that you're trying to say Hanukkah, you're just fine.
Oh, good.
Saying Chanukah, though, is...
What about Hanukkah?
Hanukkah is fine.
Okay.
It sounds weird to the English ear, but it's fine.
Okay. The look you gave me makes me think it's not, but okay.
But that C is attached to the H in the same way that we see loch in Scottish. It's a hard H rather than a weird aspirated sh noise.
Wow. Final thoughts about Hanukkah.
I love Hanukkah. We have a lot of fun every year. We didn't host a party last Hanukkah because of the whole pandemic situation.
Yep.
That was a bummer for me because it's been such a staple in our house for years. But it's a pretty great time to spend time with friends, enjoy a great meal, and get a little bit spiritual for a few minutes as we go through the story. And our tradition is always read a dedicatory prayer for a temple. We've made a point of reading the first dedicatory prayer when Solomon's temple was first dedicated, and all the way up to Edmonton's own temple dedication.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. If you want to watch some of these great Hanukkah Dreidel fight videos, you should follow us on our Discord.
Absolutely.
If you want more amazing episodes like this, you can check out our Patreon for a subscription model to help support us, or our Spreadshirt to buy some one-off merch purchases. Both help us keep this podcast going.
Happy Hanukkah.
Yes, happy Hanukkah.
And peace be with you.
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecy had fulfilled itself. God is near.
Hey, what are you still doing here? Well, your commitment will be rewarded. We're having a giveaway. Thanks to the lovely folks at Blackbird Farm and Apothecary, we have a pair of very sexy holy watermelon tumblers and coasters, perfect for the holiday season. All you need to do is check out the posts on our Instagram and Facebook, follow us, like the post, and tag a friend, and 1 entry per tag. It'll be great. The winner will be announced December 10th, 2021. Be sure to check out our friends at Blackbird Farm and Apothecary on Facebook.